think we'll just get started now. It's 9:01, at least in PST. Again, if you're joining us in Pacific time, thank you for starting your day with us. And regardless of where you're coming from, we really appreciate you being here. And my name is Aaron Klein. I'm the communications manager for CampusXR, and I'm also one of the authors of this new 2025 white paper, where we kind of go through XR trends. So we'll just get started right away. We won't stay too long in Google Slides, right? We are going to practice what we preach and actually show you an interactive white paper format that we'll dive into shortly. But before then, we'll just go over kind of what the overview of this presentation will be. And kind of the main thesis here is to explore that now in 2025, instead of sort of siloed technologies, I'm sure you're all, if you're here, familiar with extended reality or augmented reality, virtual reality. But in 2025, the trend that we're seeing now is that all of these technologies are really merging together in ways that, in ways that we're sort of losing track over. So these aren't kind of novelty, Pokemon Go, Snapchat Lens technology that kind of sit in an app or two on your phone. It's kind of all around us. So by the end of this presentation, we'll go through all the different forms of XR, showing you that they are now converged as one, and that XR is everywhere. To kind of get a better impression of what the mobile AR market is, we're finding that companies are continuing to invest extensively. So we've seen that Snapchat, HTC, really big companies are continuing, they're all in on augmented reality. And again, as I mentioned before, the convergence of, we'll get into WebXR, mobile augmented reality, makes the implementation of XR seamless even at the ground level. So we can take a digital asset that works in augmented reality, and we can have that functionally work as well, that same asset in WebXR and in a plethora of different ways. So we'll go through all of those in just a moment here. And we'll also go through, you might have seen us at a conference or two with our holographic displays, which are basically, and we'll get into the technology, fans that spin really fast that project and mimic a three-dimensional image. And when buyers see this, you might have seen it in like window shopping. I've seen certain companies begin to use 3D displays. They're 70% more likely to stop and look and window shop. And finally, it's the elephant in the room, and it has been for the last few years, and that is AI in education, what that means. And particularly in recruitment and marketing, we're seeing a lot more universities implement AI infrastructure. I think, and from conversations I've had with a lot of folks in recruitment, is that they're kind of hesitant because of their experiences potentially with hallucinations or false information. So we'll go through steps that your institution can take to actually combat hallucinations as well as getting you ready for generative AI in enterprise. So without further ado, we'll just dive straight in to the white paper. So I'm not sure if any of you have seen our white papers before, but prior to this year, they've always been printed material. And this year we thought, well, we are preaching XR, so we might as well implement an actual WebXR experience. And that's kind of our thesis, which is that all of these technologies are now one. So this would be an example of an interactive website, and we'll go through it specifically with the different examples of XR technology. So you might have seen our sort of printed materials that you can scan the QR code, you'll have an augmented reality experience, and this would be an example of WebXR in action. But before all of that, we will go through sort of the definitions here very briefly, just to run through, get on a common language here. Virtual reality. So when I talk about virtual reality, I'm talking exclusively about goggles or something where you have to put sort of like a device over your eyes. So everything you're seeing is generated by the technology. It's not like augmented reality, for example, which is through a lens. It's like a digital experience or digital element on top of the real world. So that would be example of like Pokemon Go or a Snapchat filter where there's a 3D asset being created within an existing, view or focal point. So that's the difference between virtual reality and augmented reality. Virtual is again the glasses, augmented is, through a phone potentially. Extended reality kind of includes virtual, augmented reality. It's sort of that umbrella term here. And then the new thing that we've begun exploring in this last year, and we're very excited about, is a terminology called WebXR. And this website is sort of an example of WebXR, but it's sort of a browser-based, website-based framework for VR or AR experiences that are straight through the web. And we're seeing companies like Apple, companies like Android, starting to allow deployments of augmented reality within websites, and the access for it on iPhone, the access for it on Android is becoming easier and easier to load on your screens. So the time for augmented reality and WebXR, we're really starting to see the moment come. And holograms, which you may or may not have seen at conferences, it's that fan that spins at an incredibly fast rate to present sort of like a 3D image. But in holograms in general, it's just that 3D visual representation that you don't need a headset or a phone for. And then the one we all know and love, artificial intelligence, we'll dig further into that, but we all know at this point, probably pretty intimately AI. So let's start first with, as I mentioned before in the slide presentation, sort of the market revenue of AR. We have here Tim Sweeney saying that he believes it will be one of the biggest technological revolutions in our lifetime. And the longer we get in this trend, the further we can see that, he's not off the mark here. Companies are continuing to invest in mobile specific augmented reality. And we're seeing Gen Z, whom, perhaps in my generation or the generation slightly before me, uh, we kind of grew up maybe as teenagers or in college with phones. We were sort of starting to see digital assets become prevalent in marketing material, but it wasn't our native language. This wasn't language that we had when we were 5 or 6 years old. You go to a restaurant and now you see kids with iPhones. I mean, this is like sort of, for better or for worse, it's common. It's just commonplace now. Nearly 40% of Gen Z uses AR every single day, right? So this is almost half of who we have to market towards. It's just the common language now. And even mobile AR, where users sort of engage for 2 to 3 minutes per session, it illustrates a broader trend, which is that AR is becoming the default mode of digital interaction, right? It's reshaping how younger generations experience the world. And one of the things that we realized by the end of 2025, we think that nearly 75% of the global population and almost all smartphone users will be frequent AR users. So we see this trend only continuing, with apps like TikTok, Instagram Reels, sort of the gamification of engagement. This sort of pushes that to the next level by having an actual interactive experience. To just kind of be the native language for Gen Z. And we don't think of it necessarily as augmented reality. So this is where I kind of wanted to get it in our brains. We might see on our phones sort of like a hologram looking thing, but to actually conceptualize and define that that's either augmented reality or exactly what we're looking at. So we've summed it up here, which is that the AR usage by generation, we can see it's used a majority stake in Gen Z. Um, and it leads to 2 times longer engagement than traditional media with a 3 to 4 time average AR interaction time. And we have to hold that against what the average attention span is for Gen Z, which is only 8 seconds, right? So that's not a long time if you're giving them a brochure or a marketing material or just kind of standard printed paper. 8 seconds isn't a long time to capture people's attention. So, what if we could turn those odds by giving them something that they're going to engage with for longer? And that is, from our perspective, the experience of augmented reality. And not just in terms of engagement, but in terms of the decision-making process, in terms of actually taking someone's intention and turning it into a conversion, right? So 92% of Gen Z shoppers want AR integrated online experiences. 43% have already used AR while shopping, which is 20 percentage points higher than consumers age 45 and up. So I just want to really highlight that point, which is that the Gen Z generation, this is completely native to them. So while, I might be looking at augmented reality and not entirely understanding it. This is the native language of Gen Z, which is ultimately, and these are the folks that we're trying to convert and we're trying to capture the attention towards. Yeah. So that's sort of what AR is behind the numbers a little bit. And again, we'll send this to you and you can read this more intimately. We kind of have a lot of paragraphs here defining our research on what augmented reality is. And we'll just kind of show you a brief video of augmented reality in action. There are a lot of videos here. I won't waste your time by playing video here, but we'll show you kind of briefly. This is an augmented reality experience that GWUCs did, their graduate school of engineering, where essentially what it is a business card where upon scanning this QR code, and you can just scan it via your mobile device, through your camera. You just accept permissions, and you can see a highly kind of personalized, custom experience. So it's all from this printed material. So we're still kind of keeping the personal touch of handing something out to someone. We know that that's can be very important to the branding of an institution. So it gives the students still something to hold, but at that same time, it can, you can have that sort of digital experience of actually having something that the students can engage with, gamify. It loads this experience, and you can see here there's a bunch of digital assets. So there's videos, there's a link to their virtual tour, there's links to tuition information, and it's all web-based. So there's no app that you need to download. So that's kind of augmented reality in action geared towards education. And there are a lot of different ways you could utilize this. So this is one that we did for Pace University, where it was essentially just a brochure, and you just scan the brochure in the top right corner. And as you flip through the pages, you can have your phone and you can have a completely different kind of experience of the assets on the page coming to life in video format, linking to videos, linking to social assets. So we find that it's sort of like just that added layer of engagement. Also, another benefit of implementing tech into your printed assets are you actually know who's engaging with it. You have analytics, you have all of these things that you can start to track. Yeah. And also the ability to have multiple AR experiences within a single QR code activation. In terms of pace, you have multiple pages of augmented reality all in one experience. So that's augmented reality, and we'll kind of let you all peruse through this. There's also, you might have seen us at conferences again with the mascots, just to show you that there's a lot of different ways that you can employ augmented reality. But the next thing that we've found in this last year, and something we've been incredibly excited about, is what's called, and what I've been saying for the last, 10, 15 minutes or so, which is WebXR. WebXR as the foundation for immersive student engagement. I know that that's a big sentence, but we'll show you why we feel like this is so important, especially as we start to bridge the gap between augmented reality, between virtual tours, between all of these things. We feel like WebXR is sort of like the spine that starts to bring all of these different technologies together. And to sort of sum up what WebXR is it's kind of just scroll-based interaction. That's kind of the easiest way to think about it. Where as you kind of scroll down the page, things will either pop up, animations will play, and we've defined this as WebXR. And then also with just in general browser-based experiences. So you saw earlier we had sort of an augmented reality 3D asset playing in this MSU example. So we can take, for example, that same exact 3D image, and we can use what we did, for example, with UC San Diego, where I'm fully just clicking in, rotating, and it all kind of fits within my browser, right? So I'm fully interacting with this. I can click on individual buttons, and it can take me to their alumni page, and I can review more. And this is all analytics based, so I can see who's clicking exactly on what digital assets are working. So this would be an example of an immersive session where it's a full page, but we could also attribute the same thing to an inline session, which is probably more similar to um, how this interactive website works, where it's an experience within an existing web page. So this would be another example of WebXR, where this is one that we did for TASIS, a boarding school in England, where they wanted to better exemplify what their dorms would look like to prospective students, which is a big deal, I'm sure, to boarding schools. And well, we thought, hey, what if on your website users could scroll and actually see what all the individuals' rooms look like? They could kind of scroll in and get a real sensible impression as opposed to just, videos are great, but they kind of lack that personal touch. And we all have at this point virtual tours. But what's that extra step we can take to actually get physical interaction in our, you know, digital communication? And WebXR across industries has also grown in recent years. So not just in education itself, but across the entire sort of industry. We've seen that 60% of technology and automotive companies use XR, right, to just get an impression of their product class. 46% higher engagement for XR experiences compared to even standard digital formats like video. And our opinion on that matter is it's really because of that extra layer of engagement. I'm physically clicking on something. I almost attribute it to the difference between listening to an audiobook versus actually reading the page. It just kind of interprets in your brain a little differently. And the value return per $1 spent is $4.20. So for every dollar you're spending, you're getting the money back just through a conversion or two, right? And certain verticals are leading the charge, and this is really because of technological advancements. Just in the last few years, we've just seen a huge spike in terms of browsers just accepting WebXR as Bible, right? Just with permissions and with accessibility. So also to just show you that there are a lot of different sort of creative values to what you can do with WebXR, which is, in my opinion, the one I've been incredibly excited about because it takes sort of the same principles of 3D assets, of augmented reality, and it puts it all in one place. So, for example, this is one that we did for Education USA, where they had their globe of all of their different programs, and I could actually click in,
Hi, my name is Shuai, and you can call me Ethan. I'm now.
see an actual digital video from a testimonial, and this is all in one page. And okay, let's see. We'll move to Central Michigan. Yeah. So this is sort of an example of a more just straightforward website. So it's less of an extreme 3D asset, but just more of just kind of a tailored pathway. So I'm not doing anything but scrolling, and it's kind of guiding me through the website. So all I'm doing is scrolling down. So this use case is sort of good if you just kind of want a tailored pathway. Let's say you're a program and you kind of want to guide students down a very specific story, even. You could now take them through this kind of interactive website and you have a very tailored pathway. So this would also be an example of WebXR. Um, So when you see websites that kind of have different types of scroll-based interaction where you're scrolling but things are happening, that would be WebXR. Great. And there are a lot of numbers, and we encourage you also to, look through and you could get a better grasp of a lot of these analytics. But kind of the consensus across the board has been that WebXR has been incredibly important to meeting Gen Z expectations, which is that they absolutely expect institutions to be implementing as much tech as they can into their infrastructure. And implementing that in recruitment shows that they are tech savvy in the institution themselves. And then we'll talk about something that we've seen a slight resurgence in this last year, which is that people are either looking to kind of revamp their virtual tours. This could be for a number of reasons. One that we've been noting is just the technology has changed greatly in the last 10 years. So people are just looking to revamp, including things like, 360 video, 360 stories, all these types of things to just meet the new market of what's possible with technology. So, something that we've also been seeing are guided virtual tours, self-guided virtual tours, where essentially a student can just click what they want to see. So instead of me having to just go through each stop, I can now click on a space. Let's say I just want to see the classrooms. I just want to see the labs or the libraries. I could then start that tour, start the slideshow, and
Involves alumni. Binghamton alumni enjoy returning to their
it'll just take me on that custom guided tour. And this does a couple things. We found that there was a 48% increase in time spent on site with personalized virtual tours. Someone who's able to engage with a self-guided personal tour is 3.9 times more likely to schedule an in-person visit. And it leads to an 8 to 10% enrollment increase because you just get that many more applications by showing that your school just has that added layer of accessibility. And we're kind of in a world now where being able to see schools in person is just being less and less of a commonplace. So really investing in having the most up-to-date virtual tour, whether that's in a self-guided tour or just updated infrastructure, could make the big difference in having someone at the end of the day attend your institution. And the next thing we'll dive into briefly are what we've noticed a lot of interest in the last year of holographic fan displays, also because it just has that added touch of interaction. The spinning LED 3D hologram fans. So again, this is sort of all of them in action in different deployment methods. So these are all different sized fans, but they essentially all do the same thing. So it's an LED strip blade, and it just spins at 2500 RPM. And what that does is it emulates a moving image, and it looks pretty. It's really cool, especially if you've seen them in person. But it also has numbers behind it, which is that, for example, this is we're using kind of a conglomerate of what other companies found when employing this. So 14% higher store foot traffic. So it literally got people from the window into the store. 70% of shoppers more likely to stop for 3D holographic displays versus 2D signs. So let's say you are walking down the street, you see a holographic fan, 70% more likely to attract someone to look through the window instantaneously just by having it in your window, period. Regardless of what the asset even is, whether or not it's even good. The fact that it exists, 70%. Um, so yeah, we are a big fan of the holographic fans. I'm sure you've seen them at conferences, and we encourage you also look through the videos, and you could see kind of how it works. And a lot of companies now are using holographic fans in their own sort of marketing outreach. This is one that Coca-Cola did. 90% stop for at least 15 seconds. And the general consensus when people see holographic fans are since this technology is also so new, a lot of people have heard of them, but maybe not seen them so much in person. So the general consensus is people go, wow, that's really cool. Or I want to stop and kind of look and what is that? Or what do you guys do? And that seems to be generally when we're at conferences, the feedback we receive is, if, let's say we're in a exhibition hall and there's a million booths. What's going to be that added thing that kind of gets people to stop and go, hey, what do you guys do? What do you guys sell? Um, so yeah, and we could implore that same exact principle to higher education, whether that's a mascot, whether that's a logo, whether that's a program logo, whatever it is, you can turn that into a 3D asset. And the beauty of XR nowadays is you can take that same 3D asset, so whether it's a logo, whether it's a mascot, and you can employ that into a WebXR experience. You could take that same hologram and make, because since we rig it in 3D, we could take it and make it a full WebXR experience too. Put it on your homepage, put it in an augmented reality business card. So the deployment methods are easier than ever, and they're more integrated than ever. So that's holographic fans, that's XR. Let's get into another sort of big flagship of the last few years that has been on all of our minds. That is the state of AI. And it's been my opinion that from a lot of the folks that I've been talking to, AI, from their perception, has sort of dwindled in a lot of people's eyes. Whereas when they initially tried ChatGPT, they're like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna have to pack my bags and leave the world. I don't know what human beings are gonna do anymore. And then after that year or so, the intensity kind of has fluctuated, and people think, well, how good is it? It doesn't do everything super well. Therefore, I'm not even going to look at it, especially in education, where, I mean, the facts really do matter. And especially in terms of recruitment and marketing, having it lie about your tuition on your homepage is certainly not ideal, right? So I completely understand any hesitation with employing it on an enterprise level scale, especially where there is kind of very important information that it could incorrectly dictate. But I'm gonna go into the advancements of AI and especially the AI bots for enterprise and how that kind of narrative has shifted in the last year or so. And I'm gonna start this section off by a quote from Ilya Sutskever, who was one of the co-founders and chief scientists of OpenAI, which is simply the models just want to learn. That is their only function, unlike humans, which need to take breaks, we need to go to sleep, we need to eat lunch, we need to do all of these things, we need breaks. The models purely just sit there and learn 24/7. Infinite parameters. They're just there to learn. So while we might see from our perception stagnation with AI models, they are they are not resting. They're continuing to learn, they're continuing to adapt. And we've seen that growth has not been a stagnation, it's been completely on track this whole time. And I encourage you to think back to 2019 before we had even heard, many of us had even heard of ChatGPT. And that was because GPT-2 had just arrived. And essentially, GPT-2 was basically just a preschooler. It kind of sat at that knowledge level, and that was seen as a huge advancement in 2019, where you could type and say any sentence, and it would respond, and kind of vaguely, there would be a vague connection. It wouldn't make any grammatical sense, but it would have a slight response. That was in 2019, and that was seen as a major development in the AI world. And then we saw in 2020 GPT-3, and that kind of really changed the game because we saw it kind of functioning at this middle school, elementary school level, where it could say things in complete response to the things that we were asking. Now, it wouldn't always be correct. In fact, it wouldn't be right a lot of the time. However, it would still respond, much like a middle schooler would. And this was a huge advancement in just a single year from preschooler to elementary schooler. And then that takes us to GPT-4, which really, I think, made people a little nervous and changed the game into kind of a early level college student to a smart high schooler, where it can now start to write pretty well. It could do coding pretty well. It could do image generation okay. So we see the utilities sort of starting to expand in ways that might surpass certain, knowledge banks of my own, personal ability or your own personal ability. And then in 2023, I mean, we're halfway through 2025 and we haven't seen a GPT-5 yet. But that's completely intentional and that's completely by design. So my question to you is, where will we be by 2027, right? We've seen these kind of quantum leaps in just 4 years. So what's to say where things will go by the year 2027? The answer is we just don't know where general intelligence will be of these AI models in just a few years, in just a few months. It's impossible to know. So I'll show you just briefly, and you can explore this in the white paper as well. But we built a simulation of what GPT-2 is. Um, so if I'm simply to ask it, what is a white paper? This would be kind of similar to something you would receive on GPT-2, um, which is that grammatically it's really incorrect and it can't respond to a lot of things, but it kind of has this sort of basic understanding of what you're asking. So again, just to exemplify the sort of leap we've seen in artificial intelligence over the last few years, it's not a stagnation. We're going to see aggressive growth over the next few years, which is why we encourage institutions to really start engaging with AI as much as they can, even in recruitment. even in your own jobs, even in your own work. We think it's a very important way to differentiate yourselves, not only as an employee, but as a brand, right? Um, because those who kind of disregard the technology, it'll become very easy to eventually, when it really takes off, when it's non-negotiable, to be left behind, right? Like any other technology. I mean, think about the foundations of the internet, for example. And we're starting to see institutions like the University of Michigan employ it in their own sort of like Wolverine access. You could integrate and use their own kind of GPT, which is their own private GPT assistant. So universities are using this as a way to, for a couple reasons. One, AI safety, to have a mod instead of just having everyone use whatever model, they've created kind of their own base model based off of their own information. And the question is for institutions that aren't University of Michigan, that aren't these kind of top 20 institutions that have, billions of dollars in endowment to create such models, what can we do to kind of implement AI infrastructure? So, to just show you briefly about how things have changed drastically, this is again one that we did for TASIS England. And kind of their concern was similarly, how can we prevent hallucinations as much as possible? We have a lot of different programs, and our concern is the model lying to us or trying to appease us. And that's a very valid concern. And I want to kind of explain the newest foundation of AI chatbots, which is what we call query embedding. So when you hear this, it's a whole technical sort of architecture, but essentially what that is imagine you have a FAQ page on your website, and it's of your top 50 questions that get asked the most. What query embedding does is it uses AI to then tag individually every single letter of every single sentence, and it gives it an identification, right? So that when I then ask a query, it turns my query into an ID, and it tries to match everything in terms of similarity. So think of that almost like, I know that could sound a little confusing, but in terms of sort of simple terms, think of it like a search engine. So if I'm to ask a question into Google, that's essentially how search engines work, where it's going to return the most relevant responses based on my query. So the information that query embedding uses is not generated. It's information that you've given specifically. And that's a very important distinction than ChatGPT, which has potentially the whole internet to draw from, which has, you know, billions of parameters to take predictions off of. Whereas in query embedding, it's solely taking the IDs that you've given it and you've approved as an institution. So what we did for TASIS was we said, create it could be an infinitely long FAQ. It could be hundreds of questions long. And they did. It was nearly like 800 questions. And then we query embedded all of them. And then what we did was we prompted an AI model that we fine-tuned to then take. So let's say, and I'll just show you here. So we've separated out because there are a lot of different programs and there could be crossover information. We've kind of siloed them by grade level. So let's say I'm in the lower school. You'll get this predefined. Notice that it looks very similar to like GPT or Claude or the AI chatbots that everyone's familiar with at this point. So let's say I'm to ask, what time does school start? And I ask that. So think for a minute. Great. And it'll tell you simply that school starts at 8:15 from Monday to Friday, except on Wednesdays when classes begin at 9 a.m. Are there uniforms for the lower school? And what it's doing here is it's taking my query and it's tagging it. It's seeing that I'm asking about the lower school. It's seeing that I'm asking about uniforms, and it's able to then provide like the FAQ of, maybe 5 or 10 relevant ones. Then we have an AI assistant that's looking at these returns. So imagine it's looking at like a Google search result, and the AI is taking strictly this and it is turning it into a query that feels like a GPT response, but it is entirely based off of um, uh, fact approved information and a fact approved knowledge bank. And we can include, um, links to the lower school as well. So when you ask a relevant question to a school, it'll also then send you, even uniform guidelines, right? So that you could then link it to yourself. And you could even have in your FAQ if there's sensitive information that it won't even give you that information. So the same thing works for contact information. How do I contact admissions? It should give me their email, right? And there it is. So again, it works so well because of this new method of query embedding. And if you've used maybe other schools as chatbots and you've wondered why they've gotten better, this is the reason why. Is because they're employing a method called query embedding, which then from query embedding, a GPT assistant or whatever fine-tuned model you're using, then takes that search result and then it pushes it into a fine-tuned response. So that's kind of the state of AI, and how much it's kind of grown. Our must-haves at this point in terms of AI for institutions or strategic imperatives are the following, which is it might sound silly, but an AI task force, even if it's within your own team, is going to be incredibly important. It should not be just within your IT department or a single AI department. It should be across every department, and especially your marketing department, because however many of you are in your admissions office, the AI is always available. So this chatbot is on their website 24/7 that can be interacted with. This will always be there. We can keep all the logs. We can measure how long people are using things for. And, as we've seen, the majority of questions are going to be those FAQ questions. If I ask a question that it doesn't know, it's just going to point me to you, the admissions team, to answer questions that actually need to be answered as opposed to questions that they can just find on the website. And now that, can respond accurately, I mean, the game has kind of changed a little. So having that cross-functional AI task force where you can really align yourselves, get on the same page, is going to be fundamental in moving forward. AI literacy and training, everyone should be using it at this point. ChatGPT, whether it's just personally or within, slowly into your own work, it's going to be an imperative. Data quality. I think that people hear AI and they think, I don't know how to separate the good from the bad. It's worth investing what good queries are. How do we get data quality from AI? With also embracing what makes you all so great at your jobs, which is that you're all human, right? You guys can convert students because you know what it feels like to be that age, trying to find and figure out, all of the trials and tribulations of college. And only human beings can engage with other human beings on that person to person level. So I kind of think about AI utilization as how do we make our human tasks even more human? How do we make that outreach feel even more personalized? So designing an AI infrastructure where it's kind of doing all of the tasks that, you know, you kind of don't want to do, right? All of the busy work, kind of getting those things out of the way, getting it streamlined with AI to make a more human-centered approach for the work that is imperative to what makes you guys great, marketing and recruitment people. And yeah, fostering collaboration and innovation. Always, always, always. And to sum all of this up, I know I've been rambling for the last 40 minutes, so I'll try to wrap this up. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to let me know. Just to highlight that all of this tech is converging into one. So you can scale immersive engagement, whether it's WebXR, whether it's augmented reality, virtual tours, AI, all of these things can now be one experience. Or you could take one digital asset, let's say you start with an augmented reality 3D design, you could then turn that into WebXR and vice versa. You can turn a 3D asset that you've put into a holographic display into augmented reality, into WebXR. The ecosystem is expanding and we feel like this is a really important time to get in because it's still early. It's still not widely adopted. You still don't see AR being handled by every single university, right? There's a select number of them. So it's still a great opportunity to stand out. We feel that kind of like, the first however many hundred institutions to really sink their teeth into XR are going to see the best returns possible. Whereas once everyone has it, the returns start to diminish a little bit, as does with any kind of product class that you're introducing. Once everyone has it, it's not too late, but then you're kind of just playing catch up as opposed to sort of leading, um, kind of leading and paving the way. And yeah, just highlighting that this is kind of a unified experience. And this is also what we do at Campus XR. We kind of research all of this stuff, but we could also help you employ it into your own work as well. So I'm now, after that long-winded speech, let's go into if anyone has any sort of questions, I'm happy to answer. Um, so yeah, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to let me know. But that kind of wraps up on my end. Um, this presentation. And we'll follow up with everyone in attendance today, a copy of the white paper. So we'll send it all to you to pass forward to your colleagues or to just peruse on your own end. It's this entire web page, so there's a lot to explore. There are a lot of demos to explore, a lot of videos, etc. And we encourage you all to do that. And then, as always, if there are any questions at all, please feel free to reach out. But are there any questions? Just gonna go once, twice, three times, and if there are, happy to answer them. But if there aren't, then we just really appreciate you all being here today. Going once, going twice, nothing, anything. All right. Well, then we really appreciate you all being here today. And again, if any questions do come up, please feel free to reach out at any time. I'm always available. You can reach me at, I'll type it in the chat. You can reach me here, Aaron at campusxr.org. I'll also follow up with all of you, just kind of showing you a link to the white paper itself. And other than that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us.